Hi and welcome to the We Need the Roads podcast, and well, that is your name, isn't it? Calvin Klein. It's written all over your underwear. What do you have written on your underwear, David?
Oh, let me check. Hang on. I don't know what I put on this morning. Oh! Then what does the label say? Hang on. I've gotten a bit fat, so I can't read the label. Hang on. It says H&M. There you go, H&M. Whew.
And that has been David trying to look at his pants.
That was my workout for the day. Bloody hell. That was difficult getting to that.
And welcome to the podcast, folks. From that awkwardness into what's coming up in today's episode. Well, I'm going to be talking about the news that Dan Harmon has hinted that a long-awaited Community movie might be very well on the way. And in reviews on Amazon Prime, we have the adaptation of Brian K. Vaughan's classic sci-fi comic, Paper Girls, with its 8-episode season available now on Amazon Prime. Also on Sky Sci-Fi, we have the small town horror show From, not Who, it's From. Yeah, it's a terrible show title, and it's actually from one of the producers of Lost and stars former Lost actor Harold Perrineau. And finally, we take a look at the premiere and fully delve into spoilers of episode 1 of Game of Thrones spin-off House of the Dragon. So first up, David, if I said to you 6 seasons in a movie, what long-awaited TV show to movie adaptation would I be talking about?
6 seasons and a movie.
Hashtag 6 seasons in a movie.
A
joke that the show made itself in its 3rd or 4th series, just hoping to get more seasons. And now it's going to become a reality.
I don't know, you've definitely mentioned it at the beginning as well, in what's coming up on the show, and I've already forgotten.
I mean, have you had any serious head trauma recently, David?
I did, actually. You know what? I stabbed myself recently with a knife. That's probably what it is. Lack of blood to the brain.
Okay, well, yes. I was, of course, talking about Dan Harmon's beloved sitcom Community. That even within the life of the show itself, set out its stall as Abed asked for 6 seasons in a movie of one of his favourite shows during the show itself. It's so meta. It's just, I mean, you know, it's meta. I'd say it's the metaverse, but then Facebook would sue me. And I'm not even sure what the metaverse really is. Yeah, it's a strange one, Community, because the first 3 seasons were brilliant. Some of the best sitcom of all time for me. I love the show that much. But then there were a few issues with Harmon behind the scenes, and he was fired for the 4th series. The makers kind of refer to the 4th season of the show as the Gas Leak season. And the show lost a few of its main cast. Donald Glover departed, as did Chevy Chase, and some of its magic was a bit lost. But miraculously, Harmon was then brought back for a season 5, and then the show was cancelled. But then it came back again on the nascent streaming service. Do you remember this one, David? Yahoo Screen?
I do not, Neil.
Well, it launched in 2011, and
it clearly
Community
did not do
coming
very
back.
Well.
It did not, because 5 years later, it disappeared. Well, why I'm excited about this news, David, is because creator Dan Harmon has strongly hinted that a Community movie is finally on the way, with a script written and cast negotiations on the way. And indeed, since Community, clearly the biggest star has been Donald Glover, who's become a rap superstar with his alter ego of Childish Gambino and his own show, Atlanta. Alison Brie and Gillian Jacobs have both headlined their own Netflix show with Glow and Love. Joel McHale has done lots of TV hosting, as has Ken Jeong. He made his name again in The Masked Singer in the States, didn't he, Ken Jeong? And the actor who plays Dean Pelton, Jim Rash, won an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay for the film The Descendants. We can't forget about breakout star Abed, played by Danny Pudi. He's been in loads of stuff, and he's currently in Mythic Quest on Apple. Yvette Nicole Brown Shirley actually stepped away from acting briefly to take care of her father, who was in poor health. And I think the only original character we won't see back will be Chevy Chase's Pierce Hawthorne, who had major issues behind the show with the cast and crew, and so they actually killed him off on the show anyway.
They killed off Chevy Chase?
Not in real life, on the show.
Why would I think they killed him off in real life?
Because you sounded really upset by it.
No, but they killed off Chevy... No, because Chevy Chase was like he's done the opposite of everybody else, where everybody else was unknown going into it. Chevy Chase was obviously really famous going into the show.
Here's the thing, right? From what I've read, and there's a lot of stuff to read on the behind-the-scenes thing.
And Ken Jeong, I'd say, maybe... I mean, Donald Glover, yeah, is the most famous coming out of it. But then Ken Jeong, everybody knows Ken Jeong.
Yeah. He's done well since Naked Guy from The Hangover, hasn't he?
He did. You think that little Willy scene that he had was done well for him? He's
Yep.
made a career out of that.
But what happened was, like I say, you lost Donald Glover. He was the first one to leave, and then Chevy Chase. I think if you read, well, not even between the lines, but the behind the scenes stuff on Community was that, you know, his character in this show, he's kind of like the old guy who's a bit racist and just doesn't know. That apparently wasn't a lot of acting. Apparently that was just Chevy Chase suggesting stuff all the time where he still thought he was like that. And they just worked it into the show. I mean, do you remember there's an episode where Troy just follows him around retweeting stuff he says, and the account's called Old White Guy Says. And it's just like, oh dear. This isn't, how much of this is acting and how much of it is just Chevy Chase being Chevy Chase. And I think the lines got blurred quite badly there in some ways. So, yeah, he won't be back. But, I mean...
Lampoon, it was National Lampoon what he was famous for, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, he started on Saturday Night Live in 75, and he was kind of like the big star on that back then.
I never watched Saturday Night Live, so I don't know anything about it.
Also, it was probably about 25 years before you was born when he was actually on it. But, do you know what, man? This is one of my favourite sitcoms of all time. I've probably watched the whole thing through at least 4 or 5 times now. Season 1 kind of pretends it's a standard sitcom at the start, and you're kind of like, yeah, it's fine. But then it becomes awesome because the show realises, no, we're not a standard sitcom, and we've tricked you into watching this now, and now we're going to do some real shit. You know, you've got a Halloween episode, absolutely just all ABBA music, where there's zombies in it, and people dressed as an alien. You know, it's insane.
Fucking love ABBA.
Have you not seen the ABBA episode of Community, the Halloween one?
No, I can imagine it's good though.
It's brilliant.
Whilst, like you got a bit of chicken, like, honey, I'm still free. Take a chance on me.
Please stop singing ABBA.
Okay.
But it's narrated by
Sorry.
It's narrated by George Takei, mate, from Star Trek.
Okay.
And then literally at the end of the episode, the camera pulls back and he goes, "I'm George Takei," and you're like, "Holy shit, it's George Takei," just narrating it. It's just hilarious, man. It's like every 80s zombie film where, we ate some contaminated food from a nuclear refuse site and now everyone's turning into zombies.
I hope the end song is "The Winner Takes It All."
I don't.
The winner takes it all.
Well, no, because no one won because it's a zombie film.
Has to fall.
I really shouldn't have mentioned ABBA, should I? I'm sorry. I'm sorry to ABBA. I'm sorry to Sweden. I'm sorry to all our listeners' ears right now. But what I would say about the show as well, David, my last point is it launched the careers of so many big directors now. Did you know who the main directors were on the early first couple of seasons?
You're going to go ahead and tell me, aren't you?
I was going to tell you. Did you have a guess without Googling?
I don't know.
I'll give you a hint.
Anthony Russo.
Motherfucker, it is the Russo brothers.
I googled it real quick.
You fucker. Well, did you know Justin Lin as well worked on them? He did the paintball episodes, I think.
I didn't know.
So yeah, you got the directors of 2 of the biggest franchises in the world currently, the Avengers and the Fast and Furious, started on Community, man. So it just goes to show you what an awesome show that was back then. So yes, I am very excited about this. I cannot wait for my Community movie. Give it to us now. Give it to us now, you utter bastards. Well, next up, David, it's a show with one of the worst titles of the year and really hard to search for information about it on the internet because the show is called From.
From what?
No, just From. F-R-O-M.
Yeah, but where? Where's...
No, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. From is a horror series created by a former Lost producer, John Griffin, and it stars former Lost alumni Harold Perrineau as Sheriff Boyd Stevens and de facto leader of a small town where once you drive through it, you can never leave. As the Matthews family find out in the very first episode. You got Jim Matthews played by Eon Bailey and Tabitha Matthews played by Catalina Sandrino Moreno and their 2 children, Julie and Ethan. So look, I mean, you've got a pretty cool initial premise here, right? As the Matthews family slowly lose their shit as they keep driving through the same town until they get in a traffic accident with 2 other newcomers, and the sheriff and some other townsfolk have to come to their aid before dark because at night you have monsters who look like human and I think are some kind of vampires because they need to be invited in, and then they try and kill them every night. So as the episodes progress, you will find that almost all the inhabitants of the town have had the same incident as the Matthews family, where they've just driving, they see a big tree stopping them in the middle of the road, they turn around, try and go past it, and then they all get stuck in this small town where they can never leave. Oh, and also they've got to survive vampires trying to eat them every night. I mean, that's great. That's a good central premise for a show, right? You think that's enough to build a season on, right there? Where did the vampires come from? What are the people doing here? They already do the Lost thing where someone goes, "Are we dead?" So it's funny that they're kind of taking a piss out of it all already.
I'm gonna admit something to you here now.
You never watched Lost either, did you?
I didn't know. I did not. I watch. You know what? It's one of those. I would love to watch Lost, and it's one of those shows that I've started watching. I think I watched half of the first season. But there's so many fucking episodes. It's not like today's TV where you got like 10, 12
22 episodes.
Of 60-minute episodes and 22 of them, and that's just season 1. It's just too much, Neil. My young brain can't handle that much TV time.
Young.
It's not young anymore. My old fragile brain can't handle that much TV time.
Look, I'm not without giving away spoilers to Lost, which you're going to watch, right? When it started, everyone was like, "Oh, is it going to be A, B, or C?" And the makers were like, no, it's none of that. And then when it ended, it clearly was one of the options that everyone had already guessed. So people were a bit pissed off with it. Yeah, Lost was kind of the first show that had the kind of nerd rage on the internet came out, where everyone's like, I can't believe we wasted 7 years of our life on that, for that ending. And I was like, it's perfectly fine. It's exactly in keeping with where the show had been and where it was going. And Lost is kind of one of these shows, man, where it starts as one thing and gets to another, and it's kind of a bit like Game of Thrones in that, where if you told people watching Game of Thrones, right, but there's going to be ice zombies and dragons and witches and blood magic, and people will be like, oh, well, I'm not watching that. That sounds silly.
Boobs.
And boobs. Well, but everyone watched it at the start because it was billed as, it's like it's a family medieval drama with a bit of violence in it, starring Sean Bean. Oh, okay, that sounds cool. And then it hooked people into kind of watching it more then, didn't it? It was kind of one of these shows where you're like, it's better. What it is actually better. Like I said to my parents, you would never in a million years
watch it. I think good character, plot, drama, and writing made people fall in love with Game of Thrones.
Well, yeah, and I think good showrunners and writers like that, they know we need to hook someone.
Let's not call David and Dan good showrunners here, Neil.
Well, we'll get to that when we talk House of the Dragon in a bit. But getting back, this is kind of let's circle back to From. Let's circle back like trying to drive out of the town in From, which you can never leave. Now, as I said, there's a great central premise, but there is so much other weirdness in the show that the good really outweighs the bad. Now, the unnamed monsters in it are really terrifying, man, and this show does absolutely not fuck around. Before the end credits of the first episode, David, a small girl and her mother have been eviscerated by vampires. There's a bit of spine sticking out on the floor still. I really like the vampire. I'm calling them vampires because you have to invite them in and they eat people. They really reminded me of the vampires in Salem's Lot, and I like the idea that they look like just regular people, or they look like people that the survivors have lost, and that they spend all night outside the house trying to convince the inhabitants to let them in. That also reminds me of the original stuff from the original I Am Legend book as well.
I watched last night Let Me In, the remake of Let the Right One In.
And it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, no, it was good, but I can see what you're saying, where just, ordinary looking vampires, there's nothing really, they're just normal people wandering about, but they like to suck your blood.
They're just innocent vampires, normal innocent vampires. However, the acting is all over the place, and bar Perrineau's Sheriff Stevens, who is easily the best actor in the... It's not even close to how much better he is than the other actors. And of course, he's got a traumatic backstory that we're going to find out later. Everyone else is kind of okay. The Matthews family, the wife in it, played by Catalina Sandrino Moreno. Now, she's a Colombian actress, and I honestly still can't tell after all 10 episodes, is she supposed to be Colombian or is she supposed to be American in it? Because that accent is just not the same from scene to scene. I literally couldn't figure out. I was like, and once because I googled it, I was like, what is this accent? And I was like, is she supposed to be American? Because her American accent is really weird. And I looked at the name, I was like, that sounds like a slightly South American name. And I found out she was Colombian. I was like, okay, is she supposed to be Colombian in the show? Because that accent is terrible. I don't like to shit on people's acting, man, but man.
But I'm gonna. She was fucking shit.
But I'm gonna.
Couldn't act. Get back to school, young person, whoever they were.
Well, no, it wasn't her acting so bad. It was the accent was bad. So that's a separate thing. Now, if you want to talk bad acting, not to dunk on children, but their son, oh my god, he's a spectacularly annoying kid, and I hope he gets eaten very soon.
Don't dump on children. Yeah.
Well, no, No, I just want him to get eaten.
You had a go
by a
at me
vampire.
for saying one of the kids in that.
WandaVision.
No, not one. No, it wasn't WandaVision. It was a film we watched recently, the horror film called with the phone, black phone.
I like the kids in that. They were good.
Yeah, but no, the main kids in that were good, but some of the other kids, like some of the kids that got killed and some of the other children were not good.
You thought? Well, I think. Well, they were all better than the kids in this, man. The kid is horrible. Yeah, I just want him to die. I want him to get eaten. I don't want to see him on screen anymore. You get another new. One of the characters is pretty good. There's a guy called Jade, which I thought was a girl's name, but played by an actor called David Alpay, and he's like the super smart tech billionaire guy, but he's also a massive dick. And it's like, oh, so is he going to use his cleverness to try and find a way out of town? So you kind of got him as another character. And the town is split into two factions. We have the people who live in the town and obey the sheriff's rules, and then we got the more hippie-ish commune called Colony House up on the hill. And when you arrive in the town, you get to choose where you want to live. But getting onto the weirdness, right? Like I said, the great central premise of the show, but there's so much more crazy shit that goes on in this show that I applaud the show in its utter commitment to batshit insanity. So, you've got a ghost boy in the woods that a couple of people can see, who keeps trying to lead him out into the woods, but don't go out into the woods because you'll die, because that's where the monsters are. There's talismans that they find, that if you hang them on your doors, the monsters can't get them. Who made them? Where did they come from? We don't know yet. We still don't know that at the end of the first series. Oh, you can go into a tree and teleport to other places in the town, and other places, because someone goes into a tree once and we don't see them again. There is something called the box, where if you break the town's rules, as one unlucky fellow does, then you get placed in the box in the middle of town and you are essentially left out as a snack for the monsters at night. Oh, one of the girls in the town who works as a waitress, she hears voices and scratches appear on her arm with helpful messages like, kill the boy. But I mean, I agree with that one, to be fair. Also, where does the town's electricity come from? Because strange accent lady, she spends a good few episodes just digging a big hole in her basement, trying to find out where the wires go. Because there's this whole weird thing where you can turn something on and the electricity comes onto it, but it's not plugged in, David. Where's the electricity come from? How many crazy things have you just heard there, man?
Yeah, a few, to the point where I'm a bit like, it sounds like it's a show that doesn't actually understand what it's trying to do, and it's just bouncing around a bunch of different things and has a lack of understanding of what it is.
I mean, you haven't seen one episode yet, though, so I'd
That's
hold
what
fire
I'm just
on
saying.
that.
That's what I'm under feeling is what you're saying to me at the moment. That's you haven't sold it.
I think I've sold it. It's got teleport trees, vampires,
It's got
the
teleport
box,
trees.
and you've got talismans. There's a ghost boy, mystery electricity, and you've got a girl who has like scratch messages appear in her arm, like kill the boy. Always kill the boy in this show, David.
What else do
Always.
you want?
What sounds like horns of the apocalypse coming at one point when they're in the woods. The writing of the show and the ideas and the plot drive it past the average acting of the rest of the cast. Because I have not heard of anyone in this bar the guy from Lost, man. I do not know who any of these people are. And so I had a quick Google, and what a surprise, they're almost all Canadian because it's all filmed in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. So that's got to be cold, man, when they're out there running through the woods at that time of the year. There are 10 episodes in season 1, and it was made by the Epix channel in the States, which I've never heard of, and it's on the new Sky Sci-Fi channel over here in the UK. Try saying that fast twice. Also, it's been renewed for a second series, David, so it is worth watching because we are going to get questions. And one thing I couldn't believe, I did not recognise for a few episodes till I googled it myself, the opening theme song is the Pixies doing a cover of Que Sera Sera.
What? Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Take it away, Neil.
Your singing puts me in purgatory.
Take it away, Neil. Come on, finish it off. Don't let the people down. Everyone wants to hear it.
I'm going to take you away. I'm going to put you in the box, David, and leave you out for some vampires. So overall, it's a great show driven by just weirdness and an abundance of crazy plot. Bar Perrineau, who is the best actor in it by like a country mile, the acting is all over the shop, sadly for me, but the show does not skimp on the gore, the swearing, and there's just so many different mysteries in the show that it does keep you fully engaged with it. So I'm going to say it's really worth a watch, and I'm giving it a 7 out of 10.
So, okay, nice one.
I think you'll like it,
Maybe
David.
I'll watch.
Next up, Amazon Prime has a new sci-fi drama, and it's created for TV by Stephanie Folsom and is based on the 2015 to 2019 comic book series of the same name, written by the legendary Brian K. Vaughan, and that show is Paper Girls. The premise is that while out delivering papers in the early hours after Halloween in 1988, 4 young girls get caught up in a life or death struggle between 2 warring factions of time travellers and end up getting sent into the future of 2019, where they have to find a way home while also trying to avoid finding out what happens in the future. Minor spoiler, they don't. And of course, they run into their future selves with varying degrees of success. Now, your main cast are Cameron Jones as Tiff Quilkin. She's a young African-American girl who's the super smart one. You've got Riley Neslet as Erin Chang, a Chinese-American girl who comes from a really sheltered background until she runs into the other girls. You've got Fina Straza as KJ Brandman. She's the young Jewish-American girl who comes from the rich family and has had her whole life mapped out by her parents ahead of her. And last, and easily my favourite of all the girls, is the amazing Sophia Rosinski as Matt Coyle, the white Tom girl from the wrong side of the tracks. She's poor, she smokes, she swears a lot, and she is my favourite paper girl, David. Also, she looks like Edward Furlong's John Connor from Terminator 2. And with the time to travel elements of the story, I feel this cannot be a coincidence. Google this girl in the show and then Google John Connor from Terminator 2, and they've got the same haircut. I mean, I feel sorry for her having that haircut.
Are you saying that women can't have short hair?
No, I'm just saying, why would you give her John Connor's haircut? Right, look, also, you get Nate Caudry turns up as a character from the future who tries to help the girls, and you've got the brilliant Adina Porter as the main kind of antagonist of the show. She's the villain called the Prioress. Also, a special shout out to Ali Wong. Are you familiar with Ali Wong, David? I'll take that as a no.
Sorry, I was drinking some tea.
Throw tea over you. Burning hot tea, in the face, in the eyes. Ali Wong, basically known for, I think most of us, as a comedian. She's got a bunch of specials on Netflix. She's an Asian American comedian who's really funny. And she plays the older version of Erin. And holy shit, man, she's so good in this. You don't expect to get such a dramatic, heavy performance as she plays the older version of Erin. And it's just great when you see how disappointed young Erin is with how the older version of herself's life's panned out. And like Ali Wong just gives such a performance of real depth and pathos. So getting into my pros and cons of the show. Well, the initial episodes felt very much like a low-budget, female-focused Stranger Things wannabe. In a good and bad way. I would say I think the 4 girls are all amazing actors. They're all really good. And as the episodes go on, you clearly define what their personalities and character traits are. But I think from episode 4 onwards is when the show really hits its stride, because it's now established the world of the show and the basics of the girls' different personalities. And from here on in, they all get to shine. I would say it's a bad idea to end your first episode with the song Hazy Shade of Winter that literally ended an episode of Stranger Things in season 1, if you're trying to, not be looked at as a cheaper version of that. There is some great music in the show though, man. There was a Pavement song, Spit on a Stranger, that's awesome. It's one of my favourite Pavement songs. You got the Chili Peppers Parallel Universe in it. So there's some really good music at work in the show. Music producers have picked some really good apt songs for the show. I'm a big fan of that, David. Later on, you've got some giant Transformer robots turn up in it, like the Jaegers from Pacific Rim. He's like, oh, that's a giant Transformer in a grain silo somewhere in the middle of the countryside. Okay, cool. Jason Mantzoukas, do you remember Pimento from Brooklyn Nine-Nine? He turns up later on as an even bigger bad guy in it. Now, I would say overall, right, for me, the time travel stuff and future stuff is less interesting than the episodes where the girls explore what their possible futures are, because some of them get to see what their lives could be in the future. And for some, it's better than their wildest dreams, while for others, it's just simply devastating. Mac's storyline in particular is probably the best of the whole show. It's devastatingly good. But the budget of the show is clearly super low compared to a Netflix show or a Disney Plus show. But, as I said, after the first 3 or 4 episodes, I was hooked, and that is down to how great the performances of the 4 young actresses are. And they really do well within the limited budget they've got. I feel the show is at its best when it's dealing with the adverse effects of the time travel trauma and seeing what their future could be in the dramatic moments. And it's funny, in these kind of big action sci-fi shows, normally the slow bits of the drama are what you're like, your phone comes out, you're like, come on, let's get back to the whoosh and the woo and the special effects stuff. And I think in the last series of Stranger Things, if anything, you had, where they divvied them up all into separate storylines because they realised, these actors aren't that good now. Some certain actors have not grown up to be very good actors.
Oh, don't be mean to some of these kids. I think some of them don't want to be actors anymore, is half of the problem. And then now, like with any child actor that you get for a show that's going to be running for 10 years and you grow up with these children.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, in this show, they're all superb.
Well, that's good. It's the opposite then to From.
Yeah. From loads of plot, terrible acting generally, but really engaging. This one, terrible special effect. They're not terrible, not great. No, not even saying not great. They're perfectly fine. But if they had some Stranger Things money behind it, it would definitely ramp it up a level. I honestly think you couldn't buy a cup of coffee on the Stranger Things set with what the budget for this show was comparatively. But they know that, and they focused on the strengths of the show, which is how good the young actresses are. So I'm going to give this I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 again.
Okay, so out of the two, though, what would you suggest I watch?
You're more a horror person, aren't you, David? So I would say From.
Okay.
They're both great shows, man. I both give them a 7 out of 10. There's 10 episodes of From, and there's 8 episodes of Paper Girls. And they're all currently available on Amazon Prime. And here it is, David. Finally. Maybe, as I can't remember. Wasn't this your most anticipated show of the year?
Yeah, I think so. It was this, and I think Lord of the Rings was second. It's finally here!
Spoilers? Where we're going, there are nothing but spoilers.
The bells of Balar are ringing out, David. The bells of Balar are ringing. For we have finally seen episode 1 of the Game of Thrones prequel, House of the Dragon. And no pressure, you just have to live up to one of the most popular shows of all time. Now, with David Benioff and D.B. Weiss's stock falling sharply after the divisive last few seasons of the original Game of Thrones, who would be given the thankless task of adapting George R.R. Martin's Fire and Blood's potted history book of the Targaryen dynasty to screen? Well, first up is Ryan Condal, and personal friend of Martin, who prior to the show had not covered himself in glory, writing, well, the pretty shit Hercules movie starring The Rock back in 2014, and again with The Rock in 2018 with Rampage.
Rampage was alright. Rampage was decent enough. It was decent enough entertainment. You knew what it
was.
You know?
But David, would you watch Rampage and go, that's the guy who should be directing a Game of Thrones show?
No, it would not.
No, it would not be, exactly. And from there, he then moved on to spend 3 years on the sci-fi show Colony. Not the best resume so far, but his co-showrunner is English director Miguel Sapochnik, who, again, before his work on the original Game of Thrones, didn't have the most padded out of resumes, but he has directed some of the most well-loved and simply downright amazing episodes of Game of Thrones, such as Hard Home, and Battle of the Bastards, and The Long Night. And say what you will about the storytelling in the last few seasons, you can't fault the show's scope and direction, and he was massively impressive in what he brought to the screen, and he has easily earned his seat at the table for House of the Dragon. Episode 1 begins at Harrenhal and establishes the historical context of the show. It's the 60th year of King Jaehaerys' reign, and by all accounts he was a pretty good and well-loved king, though he's getting on a bit now and he's got to choose a new heir, because he's got no sons, and in the end they pick his grandson Viserys over his granddaughter, who is Viserys' elder, Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra?
Yeah, Rhaenyra, yeah. This is the first change that happened from the book.
I don't want to get too much into the book stuff because I found it boring and checked out halfway through. And also it could potentially be spoilers.
No, it's no spoilers. It was very faithful to the source material through a lot of it. However, this is one of like the 3 changes that I saw, and it does change and impact it. So Rhaenyra being the one that is the one that was bypassed, Aegon, who's Aegon Targaryen's son, which was Jaehaerys' oldest son. So she's the daughter of Jaehaerys' older son. Whereas Viserys is...
I thought both his sons were dead, and these 2 are his grandchildren.
No, that's correct. No, that was correct. That was correct. They were... Yeah, no, all his children are dead except for one male, but I think they've bypassed him altogether, who's at the Citadel. And he's learning to be a maester, and he doesn't want anything to do with being the king. I think his name was Vaegon.
Yeah, that wasn't in the show.
That wasn't in the show. No, but what was different in the show is that it was Rhaenyra's against Viserys was the change. So it wasn't Rhaenyra's, because people overlooked Rhaenyra's altogether because she's a woman. So they just completely overlooked her altogether, and it was instead her son, Laenor Velaryon, who is the oldest male heir down the line of succession, against Viserys. But because the succession couldn't be passed through a woman, it went to Viserys instead. So it's actually even more sexist than the show was.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I know the show basically just went, well, no, we just have brother and sister. It's easier, simpler, cleaner. I'm okay with
Yeah,
that.
they were cousins, but yeah.
Okay. Sorry, yeah, cousins, sorry, yeah. So then we jump forward towards the end of the reign of Viserys, now played by Paddy Considine as excellently as you'd expect. And in a change of what we know about the Targaryens from Game of Thrones days, he seems quite reasoned, well loved, and well, normal. Loves his wife, however, he has not had a heir yet with his...
You keep saying hair. You said hair a few times. Yeah.
He has not had an heir yet, and with his wife, the Queen, having many miscarriages, he only has one daughter, Rhaenyra, played by young Aussie actress Millie Alcock. But his wife is pregnant, and he's sure it's going to be a son and an heir this time, right? This is Game of Thrones, so I'm sure nothing bloody horrific will happen, right?
Right?
Exactly. Still,
nothing bad's going to happen. It's all good.
Still, at this point, the king is happy and calls a tournament to celebrate the upcoming birth of his son. And this is where we finally get to see Matt Smith's, and I almost want to call him Joffrey, come out of the woodwork playing Daemon Targaryen, who has been away, I'm assuming, just murdering at will. And he returns to take part in the tournament. Now Smith and his wig play Daemon as an unspeakably cruel and violent man who one night, just for shits and giggles, decides to go around maiming and murdering all of King's Landing's criminals. He even chops off a cock. He's a cock chopper.
He's not like... I wouldn't say he's anything like Joffrey, though. Joffrey was cruel. Daemon isn't cruel. Daemon is... What's the word? He's...
I think he's cruel, what he says at the end of the episode.
Oh, what's the word where you're really...
He's a lot more competent, though, than Joffrey, obviously, isn't
Yeah,
he?
yeah. He's more competent, but he's got more spine to him. He's a lot more to him. But he's a lot more ambitious. That's the word I'm looking for. Joffrey was self-entitled, and Daemon is also self-entitled, but in a different manner.
But what I'm saying is, he's, as you watch season 1 of Game of Thrones, Joffrey's a clear villain. Well, one of the clear villains. There's loads of villains in season 1. Whereas in this first episode, he's clearly again positioned as like the main villain immediately.
Yeah. You can see the conflict building in throughout, which is what he's done brilliantly.
Because you're surprised. Because I think I'm a bit surprised when you watch it that you go, "Oh, do you know what? The King Viserys is actually kind of decent." By Targaryen kings.
I disagree. He's decent in the fact that he's good. He's not like when what they say, they flip a coin whenever a Targaryen's born. And it'll either be evil or good, mad or sane.
He's a sane and good one.
Sane. However,
Yeah.
like Daemon suggested, he's weak. He's too much. He petties too much to the favors of others. He cares too much what people think about him. He wants to be loved to the point where he's not respected.
Well, and here's the thing with King Viserys as well. We see at one point he has some kind of lesion on his back. And I think it's heavily implied that he is getting sicker and sicker, and he's not going to be around for too much longer, which is why he is desperate for his son to be born. Well, unfortunately, we are then subjected to one of the most visceral and disturbing childbirthing scenes ever committed to camera, where the baby has turned and Viserys has to make the tough decision to save either his wife or his son.
This is a genuine decision that frightens me to the core. Because what's one of the most frightening things about this is people actually have to make this decision.
Still to this day.
Yeah, still to this day. Like my brother, like it's something that you talk about and discuss before having a child. In this situation, who survives, the baby or me? Yeah, it's a genuine and massive fear of mine. Something like this happening. So it was dark. This scene, beautifully done. And dark to the core. Yeah, to the core.
I mean, I think the Queen makes this decision a little bit easier because she handily tells him in the scene beforehand she's just not going to have any more kids.
Yeah.
So he's like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to have her die then. And, the poor Queen, she's got to undergo a pretty graphic C-section and then promptly dies. But a son is born. Hooray! Well,
Hooray.
Yes, but sadly, the baby dies after only a few hours. I liked how that was done. That was really subtle.
Where
because
the baby just sort of stops crying a little bit.
Well, no, I didn't even notice that. I just thought it was you cut from her dying, but the son's been born, and everyone's like, "Yay!" Oh, we're sad, but yay! And then it cuts to the funeral, and then you see the second pyre next to hers, and I was like, "Shit, the son's died as well."
Yeah, well, it sort of hinted at that before that shot, with the baby sort of stops cooing and goes a bit silent and a bit still in his arms, in the maester's arms. Yeah. But this is another change from the books, an ever so slight one, and I think for the better, again, maybe. Because in the book, well, it's an added layer of detail, sorry, that they added. So in the book, she just dies in childbirth, and that's all we know that happens, and then the baby dies a day after. So I think they added the detail of how she dies in childbirth, which was a fucking dark, good medieval way, and a way of establishing who Viserys is as a man and as a character.
What they did well with it as well is they intercut it with the jousting scene, and there's that brilliant, the violence that men have and the violence men inflict on each other versus the violence that women have inflicted upon them with childbirth. And it's like Queen Emma says earlier on in the show, the birthing bed is our battlefield.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
that the cross-cutting was amazing. Superb editing in that scene. And yeah, like you say, I mean, what a scene to open up in the first episode. Or not open them, but what a scene to have is like the crux of the first episode. But yes, and sadly, after the baby dies, after only a few hours, it leaves Viserys a man bereft and a shell of his former self. And then that's where we get a bit more Game of Thrones, as in everyone begins to jockey for position to try and stake their claim forward. You have the kings. So I thought that was his older sister, and you're saying it's his cousin.
Who? Rhaenyra?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's his cousin. It's
right.
So it's his uncle's daughter.
Okay, so she's trying to make a claim, being the elder, but
yeah,
you know,
well, it's Corlys Velaryon, that's her husband, that's making the claim for her.
Yeah.
And if not her, then their son, Laenor.
And their son.
Yeah.
And of course, it's all to do with the alliances and all that kind of stuff as well. And of course, Matt Smith's Daemon immediately thinks he should be the favourite. But the small council and even the king himself harbour strong doubts over his character and temperament. Even the king's hand, Otto Hightower, played brilliantly. Do you know, I didn't even recognise it was Rhys Evans in it.
Yeah.
When I was watching it, I just bought the character, and it was only like, shit, that's Rhys Evans, like halfway through the episode I realised. Even he is trying to get in on the act, and this was, again, so subtly done, by essentially trying to pimp out his daughter, Alicent, to go and comfort and read to the king in his time of need. Clearly trying to position her as a new queen and cement his place in the new order of things. But Viserys makes his decision and decides to appoint his young daughter, Rhaenyra, as his successor, much to the chagrin of Daemon and many others on the small council. So what we essentially have in the setup for this show is we've got Game of Thrones mixed with Succession. So now, David, how did you enjoy episode 1 of House of the Dragon, and did it live up to your hype levels?
Yes, it did. It did massively. I've got real faith in this show going forward. I thought that how it subtly built tension and how it built conflict, how it positioned, like you said, with Otto Hightower positioning Alicent Hightower to go and see and comfort him, and I know how that's going to unfold, but it beautifully built the relationships that are going to be happening, the tension between them, the potential conflicts that are going to happen in the future. It was all done so masterfully in this first episode. I think this is a better, stronger start to an episode than what Game of Thrones did in their first episode.
I think a lot of people have said that. I think a lot of reviewers have been surprised at how strong and how good this episode was for a pilot.
And it was very good, even just subtly showing how people are positioned at court. For instance, Otto Hightower, during all the meetings of the council, he's the only person sitting on his side of the table, and everybody else is sitting on the other side of the table. It's such a small detail, but it just shows that he's isolated at court, and the only real ally that he has is Viserys. And he doesn't have any other allies. You know, it's details like that I make the show and Game of Thrones, George Martin as a writer, the characters being this morally grey. You know, Daemon Targaryen, like you're saying, he's not an outright cruel Joffrey. He has ambition. He has conflict that drives him, but he also can do acts of good, but he can also do monstrous acts. You know, his morals. It's morality. It's how people deal with morality and what people's morals differ to everybody else's, and how they feel they can best progress the flow. You know, he created the Gold Cloaks. He thinks that law and order should be feared and that's justifiable. It's justifiable. But
and he's a cockchopper.
Yeah, but that's justifiable. This bloke raped somebody.
Yeah.
You know, in the current scheme and this current way of doing everything, he was you know, that was allowed to happen. So would you rather walk down the street in fear of being raped or walk down the street through safety because the gold cloaks will protect you.
Yeah, but don't you see at one point the gold cloaks raping people in the background as well?
Yeah. You gotta do some bad things, I suppose. It's the
Exactly.
time.
So little flaw, a little flaw in your piece there, my friend.
But you can understand what I'm saying.
Maybe not Damon himself, but the people he's got.
How they've built relationships and how relationships are slightly like even sexual relationships. Like slight looks here and there. Like
Oh yeah, the subtleties,
moments and subtleties between characters. Yeah, it's really well done. I thought it was such a strong start to the show.
I was going to say, man, I remember when I reading about the casting and seeing that Olivia Cooke was going to be playing Lady Alicent, and I did not click in episode 1 that wasn't Olivia Cooke. I didn't
the
realise
actresses look so similar to each other.
Yeah, I did not realise that was actually a different actress, a young actress called Emily Carey, who was playing Alicent Hightower in episode 1. That's how good the casting was, and I was like, holy shit, I did not realise.
The different, like Rihanna, the older version of Rihanna, and the younger version of her played by
Millie Alcock.
Millie Alcock, and the older version of her is played by Emma Darcy. Thank you. So they don't look necessarily exactly the same, but you are 100% right with but Emily Carey and Olivia Cooke. They look like so similar to each other. I think that was, like you said, that's perfect casting between the young and the old. Well, I say young and the old. She's only like 8 years older than her, but yeah, I suppose 8 years in medieval times, a lot can happen.
You can have about 8 children in that time, apparently.
Yeah.
So, as we know, and it's a minor spoiler, but like you say, it's in the trailer. We know there's going to be a time jump at a certain point, and Emma Darcy will take over from Millie Alcock playing Princess Rhaenyra. And from the live pilot TV podcast I was at recently that I mentioned on the previous episode, the panel did mention, because they've seen the first 6 episodes, that it's almost a shame losing Millie Alcock. And they said she's so good as a young queen in the opening episodes that bringing in any other actress is a bit jarring after how good her performance is. And they said Emma Darcy is brilliant, but you're just like, but Alcock is so good, and now we don't see her ever again. So,
it wouldn't make sense though for Millie Alcock, that princess, to have adult children, which is where we're going.
And of course, you've got a lot of time jumps in the original book as well, because it's like, and this happened, and then 70 years later there was this, and blah blah blah, and boring.
The whole show is the Dance of the Dragons, isn't it? It's this, and it takes place over a few generations. So this is just the start of those generations. This is just the start of the generations. It feeds into their children as well, and their children are going to be massive parts of the show going forward. So it wouldn't make sense for Millie Alcock to play Princess
obviously
Rhaenyra throughout, as she's obviously too young.
And like you say, this show has a much narrower focus than Game of Thrones did. That, you had all the different warring, families and clans in Game of Thrones, whereas this is just purely focused on the Targaryen dynasty going forward. But I will say, the show does have, if you're thinking, oh, well, is this like my Game of Thrones though? Yes, you've got all the requisite sex, violence and swearing you've come to expect from Game of Thrones. But sadly for me, David, the one thing the episode massively lacked, and I'm hoping we get it in later episodes, is humour. Now, if you remember how great Tyrion's verbal sparring with Littlefinger and Varys was on the original show, we don't have any of that here in the small chamber meetings. And as great as the show is, it definitely needs a little bit of a humour injection at certain places. Otherwise, it is going to get a bit verbose and stale, I think, in times. It's going to be a bit too self-important and up itself a little bit. And that was a worry on the first season in some place, but then it was undercut by some brilliant comedy in it. And you can have comedy in it. It doesn't have to make it stupid. And I get that it's only one episode we've seen so far. I'm just hoping there's a little bit more humour to it.
Yeah, one of the major characters that's in the book, that's not in the show, is the dwarf called Mushroom, who a lot of the history is what we're reading through in Fire and Blood. Now, Mushroom's not going to be in the show at all. And he would have been very much the comedic relief, because he's the court jester. He's the clown, the clown, whatever they were called.
Jester, court jester.
Yeah, court jester. Yeah. He's the king's private clown, essentially, and he would have been the comedic relief, but he's not in it. Maybe because it would have not been great representation for dwarf actors. I'm not sure what the reason.
Well, also,
behind
if
it.
he's writing, also, if you said he's writing the book and we're reading his accounts, then
No,
doesn't make any-
he's not. He's not writing the book. It's an older maester that's writing the book.
well, anyway, mate, let's move on from book stuff that's not relevant to the show.
He's one of the the first-hand accounts of everything that happens.
One other sort of minor problem I got with it. No, it's not even a problem. It's just like a minor thing was that there was a hell of a lot of new characters to introduce in one show, and even I was, as much as I was paying attention, I was trying like, wait, so this character's related to them? Are they? Aren't they?
Yeah.
Who's that
So,
again?
for instance, you got confused between the not being cousins and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, loads of stuff like that, man.
Yeah.
But this show, and everyone says about the treatment of women in the original show. Well, clearly this show's trying to address that. And as Terry White said in a review at the Pilot TV pod, this show is about smashing the patriarchy, and the catalyst for all the events of the show at the end of the first episode is that a queen has never sat on the Iron Throne, and we're guessing no one wants her to. I will say, though, was it a good idea to make a throne out of swords that you keep cutting yourself on, Viserys? I mean, I'm sure that back wounds probably come from that Iron Throne as well.
He didn't make that throne. King Aegon made the throne. It's a status of power, isn't it? You're not gonna King Aegon. The throne is built from the enemies of, I think it was Harrenhal, potentially, or maybe some other enemies, from the war of his conquest. And all the enemies, he made them lay down their swords and had them all collected, and had the throne made out of all the swords of the fallen enemies. That's why they're all burnt and twisted and disfigured through dragon flame.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, what are the odds he got that cut on his back that turned into that from one of those swords? We don't know that yet.
That is where it came from. They said it.
Oh, did they?
The Maester said it outright in the show. Yeah, that it's from the throne. But that's...
So here you see, sitting the Iron Throne will metaphorically and literally kill you.
There you go. It's clear metaphor there, isn't it?
And literal. Because he cut his finger on it again in it. When you were saying about, a little while ago, you were mentioning about the subtleties in it and the looks. There are hints that Daemon actually fancies his niece, Princess Rhaenyra, when he gives her the necklace.
But then 100%, buddy.
But then also you see that her best friend Alicent had the eyes for Daemon at the tournament, despite her dad trying to pimp her out to the Grieving King as well. Now,
and the Kristen Cole as well, the knight that bested Daemon.
Yeah, I mean he's clearly going to get a kick in coming down the line, I'd imagine.
I mean he's a sexy man, that bloke. So
he's a Prince of Dawn, isn't he? So he's like the new Pedro Pascal, I guess they're going for. In a way. The thing is, right, you've read the book, right, and clearly it's sunk in a lot more.
He wasn't a Prince of Dawn. He's the lowborn birthed son of the Dondarrion, I think.
That's what I mean, man. But I think going forward, when we talk about the show, anything that's not in the show but's referenced in the book, we stay away from, because obviously you've read the book, so you know where the story goes. I read some of the book, got bored, and I can't remember where any of it goes. So I think when we do discuss the show, we don't want to have any hints of where the story's going to go or what's going to happen to certain characters, because obviously you've read it in the book. But again, what the show's going to do is it's going to fill in a lot more backstory and a lot more intrigue to what these characters are going to be going through than you really get from the book. Because that's one of the things I didn't like from the book is it doesn't really get into the characters much, does it? It's kind of like you say, it's a history book.
So much, aren't there?
And what we saw in episode 1 clearly shows that there's so much of this. I mean, without getting into the book too much, as I said, I found it dull and pretty badly written, because it is a history book, not a narrative story. But also, to Game of Thrones fans who have waited long enough to the actual end of the Game of Thrones books series, maybe stop fucking around, George. You could have got Winds of Winter written instead of fucking writing a history book of the family. You could have just done that. Anyway,
I get what you're saying. However, the man wants to do what he wants to do, and he'll do what he wants to do. He doesn't want to do what people are telling him to do.
Well, he's a dick. I'm sorry, but just finish your magnum opus. Finish the greatest work of your lifetime, and then fuck around with all the other stuff. Not fuck around with the other stuff first, and don't finish your magnum opus.
Winds of Winter, I think, will be coming out next year. I've got a good feeling Winds of Winter will be out next year.
Mate, I was still waiting for these books to come out when I was on ships. So there you go.
And then Dream of Spring is the next one after that.
Yeah, good luck with that.
It wouldn't surprise me if he brings them both out back to back, almost like as a sort of like, I was doing both at the same time.
I'd be amazed.
But
I'd be absolutely
I would
amazed.
be amazed at that as well.
Right, well, look, I think from the show, and again, this is from the show, not from the books, because I don't know. So you can't really respond to this because you read the book, but I think we are headed for the two young best friends, Rhaenyra and Alicent. I think by the end of the first series, they're going to be mortal enemies and just clashing over by the end of the first series. That's my kind of prediction, because they're clearly setting them up, aren't they?
I mean, that's in the trailer.
So overall, I think I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10, David.
Yeah, I'd agree with a 9 out of 10. I thought it was brilliant. We've had people complaining about that birth scene. It's had quite a lot of complaints because there wasn't like a warning beforehand. I don't know how you can warn before a birth like that. So do people want there to be like a warning? This scene is going to be graphic, and then go into it. Like that just completely break you out of the show. And I think at the very beginning of the show there is like a warning. This show contains graphic images, content viewers may find disturbing, all that sort of stuff. So I don't know what people actually wanted there to be said or shown at that point.
Well, I don't get into the whole debate because like people can't read books these days without apparently being offended by it. So
Do you know, I really wish I cared about my own country's heraldry as much as I do about Game of Thrones heraldry. Like our own, like, because if you think it's like, well, this is War of the Roses is Game of Thrones, so if you consider this is like the Plantagenet era of infighting between the English houses, but there was all French. So, but anyway, I'd love to to actually, I do care a little bit, but to research and know as much as I do about my own country's history.
So yeah, I think what we're going to be doing, David, as and when we do our next podcast, I think we might be coming back to this every week, don't you, or every episode?
Yeah, come back to it every now and then.
Every now and then, I think whenever we do record, we'll do a little recap of Game of Thrones, work our way through the seasons, and you can be I'm clever because I've read the book and I know what happens to characters.
I'm just clever, Neil. It's nothing to do with reading the books, knowing the characters. I'm just that guy, man. I'm just that guy.
We did establish at the start of one of the previous pods you can't read, so yeah.
I can't know. The book has amazing artwork running throughout it, though.
Is that to make up for it being boring?
Yeah, maybe. I love fantasy artwork. I just think it's gorgeous. Who did the art?
But David, one more thing before we go. We are excited to announce we have done a promo for the show, which, if you're listening to us already, you probably have an idea of the organised chaos that our pod is. However, if a friend says, well, what is We Needy Bros all about? Then this promo should at least answer one or two of those questions. But that fabulous piece of news is not all, David.
Is it not?
We are now open for promo swaps here at We Needy Bros. So, if you want to promote your podcast for free on our podcast, then you can enter into a fustian pact with us and send us a promo for your show, which we'll add here at the end of the pod for friends of the pod, and we will send you our 30-second promo for We Needy Bros. Honestly, it's that simple. And our first promo swap is from the enigma himself, Mr. Edward October, creator of the True-ish, and classic tales of the paranormal Octoberpod over on YouTube, with new videos on the first and third Tuesday of every month, and also his companion podcast Octoberpod AM, which is available wherever you get your pods from. And if you can take a look at his website, octoberpodvhs.com, where you can also find merch and a spin-off comic. I could tell you more about Octoberpod, but I will let the dulcet tones of Mr. Edward October tell you himself.
I'm Edward October. There's only one way to serve a fine bourbon, poured neat and slowly savored. The retro horror stories served by Octoberpod are just as refined as an aged bourbon, but now there are two ways to enjoy them. Subscribe to Octoberpod Home Video on YouTube. There we debut our latest true-ish, and/or classic tales of horror and the paranormal on the first and third Tuesday of each month. And now you can pour yourself a double serving of Octoberpod. Find Octoberpod After Midnight, that's Octoberpod AM for short, on your favorite podcast app. There, on the second and fourth Tuesday of the month, we serve up tall glasses of our most horrifying spirits, specially curated for you to savor. Each episode of Octoberpod AM lasts about an hour, just long enough to sip a good scotch by the fire. Now there are two ways to enjoy retro horror thrills of impeccable taste. Find all our links at octoberpodvhs.com. Octoberpod, retro horror for bold individualists.
Well, I think you can agree with me, David, that man has an amazing voice.
It was super sexy, Neil.
Right, see you next time, folks.
We Needed Roads.